Well, we looked very carefully at the past expenditures to fight AIDS as they've grown over the last decade, and then we estimated out into the future. And if we continue on the current course that we're following, the future price tag is going to be quite daunting and in some ways may shock people who haven't been looking out more than a few years ahead. We would estimate that on the current track that we're following, it could be costing as much as $35 or $40 billion a year, a decade or 2 decades from now, as compared to around $15 billion today.
The global economy is not as strong as it once was. Money is not flowing as freely towards not just health and HIV, but all social sector programming. So we really need to think about how are we going to manage that? How are we going to ensure that we can continue doing everything we need to do, even in the face of tightened resources?
Now we are moving from abundance to scarcity. And what aids2031 was calling for is more efficiency, more value for money, and making sure that our delivery system can be simplified.
We need to think about a treatment tools and treatment paradigm for developing countries that can be sustainable for much larger populations over the long term and sustainable both financially and within the health infrastructure that's available in developing countries. We have to keep the pressure on the donors to invest in the development of technologies that won't be ready in 5 years, but that really have a much longer perspective.
Countries like South Africa, Zambia, Mozambique, some of the East African countries, treatment will still be a huge part of what they do 5 or 10 years from now. The work we did in our group in South Africa, for example, suggests that even under the best of circumstances, South Africa could be spending 2/3 of its AIDS program in the treatment area 10 years from now. So treatment is going to remain a very large part of the equation there. In that situation, we need to do everything we can to make sure that treatment is as efficient as possible, to bring down the cost of drugs, to bring down the costs of the other components, the other things that go into treating an AIDS patient, especially the cost of the health workers.
There hasn't been probably the type of integration and coordination across different programming and funding streams that we really need to be maximally effective. And I think there's a big opportunity now before the global community to look at the work that's being supported by the Global Fund, by governments themselves, by various bilateral donors, and really say practically, how do we integrate what we're doing so that we're doing it in the most effective and efficient way possible?
Countries and governments really do have choices. And those are dramatically different choices. These choices to focus prevention efforts, to intensify where we know prevention works, to try to make treatment money go further by becoming more efficient. These are things that can make dramatic differences, and these can save literally millions of lives, avoid millions of new infections.